Emotional, in one word. I had time to reflect by the time I got home last night, and reflect on the day and what it meant. And yeah, emotional is how it felt. Alan, risked all kinds of abuse and death threats and all that in 1991 when he stood up and kind of started this campaign, and to be able to sit with him in the public gallery yesterday, when this was being read out, was quite something. It really was. Decades of campaigning to finally bear fruit and to be done was quite a special thing to be part of, and I think it was an incredibly positive thing, and I think it can start to help heal the wounds of the past, and hopefully bring some kind of comfort to those who are sadly no longer with us. So I think it is long overdue, but it certainly wasn't too late.
Are you surprised that it's taken so long for this apology to come forward?
In a way, yes, but I can also understand the complexities of something like that. They were very, very different times back then. The dark days, as Alan Shea refers to them as, and they were. I as a 16-year-old, I knew I was gay, but I didn't tell anybody because I was terrified. I saw what this man, I'd never met him. I didn't actually meet Alan until last year. But he's been a hero of mine since. It was a darker. I don't know how to say it politely. It was a terrifying time, and a lot has changed since then, and a lot for the better has changed since then. Obviously, we've had the law was changed; it was decriminalised. Then we had the age of consent. Then we also had civil partnership, same-sex marriage. So I just think certain things had to happen before we could get to this point, and before it would be almost a true resolution, if you like, and because included in the apology was also the pardon.
Yeah, and I think that was something that Alan Bell had previously picked up on, was that although it was something he recognised needed to happen, there was a number of things that had to happen first. Yeah. Otherwise it would have seemed hollow to say, we apologise, but we haven't even gone on that journey yet to rectify those things that we recognise within legislation are still wrong. So I think we've now come on that journey. We've, I've been privileged to be part of the team behind the Sex Offences Bill within the Department of Home Affairs, and to really see from the inside the importance that's been placed on getting that pardon right, making sure that pardon was an automatic pardon, and then having a disregard on application. And those things being in place, it was absolutely the right time, and I'm delighted that the Chief Minister, took that on his shoulders, put together what was an incredibly moving speech. I certainly sat there with a tear in my eye, because when you've got someone such as Alan Shea in the gallery, Zoe was obviously there as well, and you can see what this truly means to people who've been part of that lived experience. That's really, as a lawmaker, for me, that's when you really realise just how important it is that we get things right. And when things haven't been right, we make sure we rectify it and we put right those historic wrongs.
I personally believe it was a genuine and heartfelt apology to all of those who were persecuted back then. And I think certain things had to happen in order for it to be that, to be genuine, and for people to be able to look at it and say, yeah, okay, we accept that.
The Chief Minister called for the whole community of the island to challenge prejudice and ignorance. What does that look like? How would someone go about challenging prejudice?
I think one of the things that we've seen is that there was always people who would have called themselves allies of the LGBT community, but actually people were fearful of speaking out because then they would put that aggression and threat potentially on themselves as well. And I think we have to, as we say, empower people to be able to call out equality issues and say call out inequality, but when things do not fit with that. And it's not just within the LGBT community, that's certainly within the broader community. We need to make sure people feel confident and able, that there are appropriate channels. That's making sure that there is confidence within our police, that's championing our third sector, and making sure there are mechanisms that when those things don't work and where there is inequality or discrimination, people feel confident to report it, they feel supported, and that other people are willing to say, actually, that's not okay.
Yeah, it's about calling it out. And like we say, it's not just about discrimination against LGBTQ plus people. It's any kind of discrimination. I mentioned to somebody yesterday that the island is an incredibly welcoming place. You look at the TT Festival when it's a day like today, absolutely tipping down, and strangers are offering strangers places to go to dry off and we are an incredibly welcoming nation, and I think that it shouldn't just be restricted to those 2 weeks of the year. I think it is becoming more prevalent that people are willing to call out when they see somebody being discriminated, and they are willing to stand up and say, hang on, that's not right. And there is a lot more respect and acceptance these days. I don't think the attitudes have changed. I just think the tolerance level of those it's being directed at is no longer the same. We aren't going to sit and be victims, and people aren't going to sit by and be silent when they see something that is unjust and that isn't right and it isn't okay. They will stand up and say, hey, no, that's wrong, I've got you back.
I think, interestingly, there's probably been a big shift in terms of people feeling comfortable to do that when there's a person-to-person human engagement. Yeah. But I would argue that actually we're still some way to go in terms of social media, where I think it's far easier for people to make statements that would appear to be discriminatory. And I think, again, people feel less comfortable calling them out because it can very quickly descend into a quite nasty exchange of views, and I think that there's a big piece of work actually in terms of education in our schools, support for people when they feel that they're being victimised, understanding how to go about doing that, how to keep themselves safe online, and certainly those are things that through Isle of Pride we want to make sure that we support throughout our ongoing presence in the island.
I think it's also about having ongoing dialogue with people who do hold those views. Trying to understand where they're coming from and why. And it's not necessarily about beating somebody over the stick with, the equality branch. It's more about, having difficult conversations with people who don't agree with you, and finding a common ground that you can work together to build something more positive, rather than just having the safety of sitting behind a keyboard or on a mobile phone and calling somebody all the names under the sun because they can't, it's not a physical thing. It's a very distant thing, and it feels very safe to be able to do that. Yet that action and those words still hurt just as much as if somebody was stood saying it to your face. So I think having conversations around being more respectful towards people, I think is certainly one thing that we certainly want to have a big impact on, and try and promote throughout our different initiatives as they come up.